2 days before Christmas in 2024, as rain slicked the streets of Portland and holiday lights blinked through misty shop windows, my world shifted with a single phone call. I'd just stepped into my studio loft in the Pearl District, exhausted after a 12-hour shift at the veterinary hospital. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic, and my hair was damp from the drizzle outside. I shrugged off my jacket, my eyes falling on the burgundy duffel bag waiting by the door, already packed. A soft plum scarf lay folded on top, and several small gifts were tucked carefully inside, each one chosen with precision and affection. I'd even found the rare olive tapenade my uncle adored. I tried yet again to get it all right, hoping this year things would be different. My phone buzzed. The screen glowed with my sister's name page. I answered with a tired but genuine grin. "Hey, Paigey." But her voice was cautious. "Hey, Harper. So, just letting you know, Leo's coming for Christmas." My breath caught. Her new boyfriend, the one obsessed with energy healing, who once sprinkled salt in her apartment because I'd mentioned euthanasia cases at work. "He's super sensitive," she went on. "And the stuff you deal with at the clinic, it's kind of heavy for him. So we thought maybe skip Christmas this year. Nothing personal." I stared at the string lights twinkling around my thrifted window garland, their glow suddenly dull. "Nothing personal." Before I could reply, my father called. His voice was soft but edged. "Honey, we just want calm. You know how delicate Leo is. If you show up, it might get tense. To be honest, if you come, we might not answer the door." No gentle lies, just dismissal dropped like a stone. I didn't yell, didn't sob, didn't beg for a seat at their table. I simply gazed at the small gifts I'd wrapped with trembling care for people who never truly saw me, people who only missed me when my absence disrupted their convenience. This year, I chose silence as my answer. I opened my laptop. The payment for my parents' overdue mortgage, canceled. The quiet transfer into Paige's fund, blocked. The auto loan I'd co-signed for Dad last year, canceled. I wasn't angry, just done. For years, I'd believed that if I gave enough, stayed helpful enough, kept showing up with cookies and calmness, I'd finally earn a place at the table, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. I thought being dependable made me indispensable. But in the cinnamon-scented quiet of my Portland loft, the radiator clicking softly, the truth settled like snow. I was never celebrated. I was simply tolerated until I wasn't. Outside, rain shifted into drifting flakes, blanketing the streets in hush. I gazed through the window, feeling something startling, relief. No more contorting myself to fit. No more shrinking, waiting for permission to belong. This Christmas, I wouldn't be the outsider pressing my face to the glass. I wouldn't be the almost enough. They only remembered me when something needed fixing. I used to think it was normal that some kids got spotlight and softness while others were expected to exist like furniture, steady, useful, silent. I was the oldest, the test run. Dad used to joke at barbecues, the trial child, the one who earned affection through usefulness. Meanwhile, Paige, for years younger, was the miracle baby, the spark, the artist. When she skipped rent to start a candle shop, it was ambition. When I worked extra shifts at the vet hospital, I was overdoing it. I remembered her spray painting stars on the garage door at 16. My parents called it art and laughed. 2 days later, I chipped a plate and got scolded for carelessness. Once in high school, I finished my FAFSA and left it out for Mom to sign, highlighted. She never asked. When my veterinary school acceptance arrived, I carried it home like a trophy. She glanced at it and murmured, "That's a lot. Don't lose yourself," then turned back to chopping onions. When Paige dropped out of college for a crystal reading podcast, they hosted a dinner with wine and candles. A framed photo of Paige painting still hangs in their hallway. The same house that never threw me a graduation party seemed to vibrate with pride for the daughter who hadn't held a steady job in years. I once found my old sketchbook there, half filled with doodles of Portland sunsets and patient pause mid-recovery, tossed into the recycling under pizza coupons and junk mail. When I asked about it, they shrugged, laughed, said they thought it was scrap paper. Maybe it was to them. Maybe I was too. Still, I kept showing up through veterinary school, internships, and long nights in quiet exam rooms. Most vets avoided rooms filled with fading photos, whispered regrets, and the ache of being overlooked. That's why I chose geriatric care for animals. I saw myself in those forgotten places, pets who had poured their lives into humans, now only noticed when something was wrong. At home, my role never changed. I was steady, the helper, the invisible support holding cracks from spreading. When the roof leaked after a storm and insurance denied the claim, I paid quietly. When Paige's freelance art dried up again, I sent money without questions. When my mother's arthritis flared and her therapist stopped coming due to missed payments, I called scheduled covered, because I loved them, or because I believed love was transactional, earned through sacrifice. They never said thank you. Didn't need to. In their world, love wasn't spoken. It was assumed, expected, like gravity or daylight. Every time I gave a piece of myself, they took it, not maliciously, blindly, never asking the cost. For years, I thought family meant being unseen but indispensable, like scaffolding, essential but never the focus. That night, after the calls saying I wasn't welcome for Christmas, something inside me snapped. Scaffolding isn't meant to bleed for the building it holds up. I was done shrinking my life to make theirs comfortable. Julian impulsively bought vintage lenses but couldn't afford his Thanksgiving flight. I bought his ticket. He hugged me at the gate, called me the best sister, and by next week, it was forgotten. Just another favor folded into the invisible ledger I was never supposed to see. No one asked. I was always one step ahead, a ghost fixing, smoothing, quietly necessary. They never said thank you. Maybe because gratitude makes leaning harder. I told myself it was easier that way. Visible things get judged or left behind. So I disappeared behind their comfort, hidden, unbreakable, until now. After 12-hour shifts, I'd sit by the window, sip peppermint tea, and wonder what it would feel like to simply be seen. Not for what I could fix, pay for, or hold together, just seen as Harper. But those thoughts felt like luxuries. Wishes for dreamers with canvases and paintbrushes, not for someone juggling spreadsheets and overdue bills. So I kept going. Every Christmas, I brought the bread pudding they loved and smiled when they asked, "Who made this again?" As if it had floated in on the holiday breeze. When Paige's rent came up short, I wired money without a word. When my parents struggled with their tax forms, I stayed on the phone until midnight, guiding them line by line. Meanwhile, my own taxes sat untouched, piled beside the fridge. I told myself love meant showing up, being steady, solving everything. That one day, if I carried enough weight, someone would finally see me beneath it all. But standing in my small kitchen, the phone still warm from the call that banished me from Christmas for being too much, I knew better. They wouldn't see me, not because they didn't care, but because I'd never asked them to. I had trained them not to. That night, with cinnamon lingering in the air and snow falling like absolution outside my window, I picked up my phone, not to call, not to plead. I opened my banking app. Quietly, I hit cancel. The $8,000 I'd been sending each month to keep their mortgage afloat, gone. Emergency savings, locked. No more surprise repairs. No more midnight rescues. Paige's dead car battery next winter? That would be her problem. At first, it felt robotic. A few taps, cancel, auto-transfer, end payment authorization, freeze joint access, like brushing my teeth or paying rent. Routine. But with every click, a strange stillness unfurled inside me. Not numbness, not bitterness, freedom. A bird stretching its wings, dry, tentative, realizing the cage door had been left ajar all along. I opened my notebook and made a list, not to guilt myself, just to see all the quiet losses I'd swallowed without a word. The flights, the surprise surgeries, the bounce checks, the broken down cars, the dozens of emergencies patched up behind the scenes without thanks, without ceremony. The ink blurred, not from tears, but from the weight of finally seeing my own exhaustion. I wasn't angry, just tired. The thing about being invisible for so long is people only notice when you're gone, when things fall apart. The missed mortgage payment wouldn't sting until the final notice arrived. The canceled maintenance fund wouldn't matter until the pipes burst again in February. Paige's freelance work would rise and fall like waves, but this time, no net beneath her, no quiet sister stitching it all together with love and bank wires. I made no announcements, no dramatic exit, No cryptic posts. I didn't even tell Aunt Marlene, the only one who still mailed handwritten cards. I unplugged the half-written Christmas email I'd drafted, wishing warmth and love, and deleted it. On the 8th day of my life, I gave Epic Times New York the key secretly. The small tree I'd set up in the corner, I unplugged its lights. The presents I'd wrapped carefully, thoughtfully, I slid into the hall closet, their shiny paper suddenly absurd against my choice. I didn't cry. There was no room for sadness, only clarity. Love isn't supposed to feel like unpaid labor. Family shouldn't feel like a subscription with hidden fees. I'd spent decades trying to earn what should have been freely given. But silence is not love. Usefulness is not belonging. Crosstown, in a house glowing with lights and noise, they laughed without me. For the first time, I let them. I let them build their celebration on the illusion they'd curated, the one where I was the problem, where my silence was bitterness, my distance was blame, where I was the heavy one, the complicated one, the one who never fit the sparkle of their curated holidays. For the first time, I didn't show up. And in doing so, I reclaimed something I hadn't known I'd lost. Christmas morning arrived, soft and gray, the Portland skyline cloaked in fog. Snow clung to rooftops like forgotten frosting. The silence outside echoed the silence within. I sat by the window, wrapped in my favorite blanket, the one scented faintly with rosemary and comfort. A warm mug of cinnamon apple tea cradled in my hands, steam rising like memory. I didn't light the tree. I didn't press play on the carefully curated holiday playlist I used to fill the silence. I didn't call. I didn't text. I simply was quiet, whole still. The gifts I'd wrapped sat untouched in the corner, colorful, cheerful, naive. They seemed foreign now, like they belonged to someone who still believed effort meant belonging. But there was no grief that morning, no ache, no tears, just stillness, sacred, cleansing stillness, like the breath after a long scream, like the calm after a storm. I hadn't realized how much noise I carried until it vanished. Time moved differently. Noon passed like a whisper. No calls, no clatter from my parents' kitchen, no festive selfies from Paige and Leo with hashtags about joy, no surprise Venmo requests, just silence. I felt no urge to break it until evening, when the sky bruised purple and my phone buzzed once, then again, 3 times in total. At first, I ignored it, probably a group chat from work I forgot to mute. But then a message lit the screen, Marlene. Can you answer? You've done enough damage already. I froze. Damage. I hadn't even been there. My phone rang. Her name flashed. I picked up, voice rough from disuse. What happened? Her tone was gentle, like approaching something fragile. They say you ruined Christmas, she said quietly. But, Harper, you weren't even there. The words hit like ice. I blinked. How do you ruin something you weren't invited to? She hesitated, then explained in pieces. Apparently, after dinner, Marina, wineglass in hand, admired the family photos on the mantel. She paused in front of a faded, crooked snapshot from a birthday party long ago. I must have been 11 mid-laugh, wearing a too big maroon sweater, one sleeve swallowing my hand. Marina tilted her head, squinting. That's Dr. Harper Morgan, isn't it? Aunt Marlene nodded slowly. She's the one who sat with my neighbor all night. Saved her life. Really? The room shifted. Laughter cut off like a switch had flipped. Forks hovered midair. Glasses stopped clinking. Paige went pale. My mother's smile froze. Marina looked around and asked, Wait, Harper's your sister? No one answered at first. Whatever came next, a half-truth, an evasive comment, was enough. Marina gathered her things, thanked everyone with a politeness sharp enough to cut glass, and walked out. Just like that, by the time Aunt Marlene called me, the ripple had begun. Marina had posted something online, nothing explosive, just honest. A few sharp lines about families rewriting people to fit prettier stories, about silence as an eraser, about damage done in rooms lined with smiling photos of people you pretend don't exist. I didn't know the exact words. I didn't need to. I pictured it clearly. The crash of the curated image, family, friends reading between the lines in Portland's small, gossipy art circles, The quiet unraveling of a brand built on charm and exclusivity. And for once, someone else noticed. Not someone raised in it, not someone trained to interpret cruelty as affection, someone who had seen me, not as a burden, but as human. A doctor, a sister, a presence. That night, alone in my apartment stillness, I learned something more powerful than any comeback. Sometimes the sharpest truth is the silence you leave behind. The day after Christmas, it began. An email titled, "Let's Reset Things," read like a corporate memo, bland, polished, empty, signed by my mother, father, and Paige, as if unity could overwrite decades of fracture. No real apology, just talk of holiday stress, valuing family. Buried halfway down, the real ask, could I reach out to Marina, smooth things over? Not because they missed me, not because they understood, but because Paige's art career was at risk. It wasn't about me. Never was. Just the mess my absence left behind, a mirror they could no longer avoid. They hadn't reached out because they missed me. They realized the cost of erasing me was too high. I didn't reply. At night, snow whispered outside. My phone buzzed again, this time not family. It was the clinic administrator, David Reynolds, a man I'd only met once at a fundraiser. Kind eyes, firm handshake. He sounded hesitant. "Harper," he began. "This is a little awkward, but I got a call from your father." He cleared his throat. "He said he's worried about your emotional well-being, that maybe you've been under stress and might need some time off." My blood turned to ice. Not the numbing kind, but the hard, sharp kind. Weaponized concern. My father, who once joked that I was too intense, was now using that to paint me unstable, not because he believed it, but because he thought it would control me, scare me into silence. It didn't work. David saw through it and said as much. But the message was clear. They weren't seeking reconciliation. They wanted leverage. The next move came. Smear campaigns through group texts, whispers to cousins and distant aunts. "Harper's going through a tough time. She's isolating." No mention of Christmas. No mention of exclusion. Just concern, weaponized as control. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since Paige's first gallery show messaged me. "Hey love, if you need a yoga retreat, I've got a discount code." Overwhelmed, awake, polished manipulations. Every betrayal wrapped in performative care sharpened my clarity. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting their narrative. The story where Paige was the gifted star and I was the quiet utility who never made waves. But I was done smoothing their story. Outside, snow fell softly, erasing every footprint of the paths I'd taken to make myself smaller for them. For the first time, I felt no urge to defend myself, no need to explain the truth. But it didn't end there. It never does with people who feel entitled to your silence. It came next, soft and cold, my mother's voice outside my door. A quiet Sunday mid-January, the bone-deep winter chill pressing against the windows like breath. I was at my desk, charting patient notes, a mug of tea forgotten beside me. Then I heard it, a soft knock. I didn't move, just listened to my heartbeat steady calm. I rose, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. There they were, my mother, my father, Paige, humbled in coats, smiles stretched thin, a picture-perfect apology framed in desperation. I didn't open the door. Not yet. I didn't feel fear, just a distant, aching sadness, the kind you feel when you finally realize the rescue ship you've waited for all these years is just another mirage on the horizon. I opened the door an inch, just enough to let the cold slip through and sting my skin, not enough to invite them in. My mother spoke first, her voice soft, practiced, coated with something meant to sound maternal. "We just want to talk," she said, gripping her purse like it held all the right words. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't soften, because I saw it clearly now. They weren't here for me. They were here for the old version of me, the one who believed love could be earned, the girl who folded smaller and smaller to fit into the tiny spaces they offered. That girl didn't live here anymore. Silence swelled between us, brittle and loud. I watched my father's jaw twitch, irritation flickering in his eyes. Paige shifted, as if her sneakers might lift her off the porch entirely. They were uncomfortable. After a moment, I gave them the only word that mattered. No. No speeches. No justifications. No bridges built from my own splinters. My mother's face cracked, part confusion, part disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom that the scaffolding she'd leaned on for decades had finally crumbled by choice. I closed the door quietly. Not a slam, not a statement, just a boundary. Outside, muffled voices rose and fell, first pleading, then sharp with frustration. What? I didn't listen. I walked back to my desk and wrapped my fingers around my mug of cold tea, letting the silence wrap around me like something sacred. On the shelf beside me sat the framed letter from Marina, the ink slightly smudged, her handwriting pressed with care and intention. I looked at it and felt, for the first time, weightless. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to mold myself into a daughter they could applaud, how I'd soaked up their guilt, their silence, their neglect, and turned it into fuel to keep showing up. I was never meant to be a mirror, never born to reflect their pride or absorb their disappointment. There was something else. Maybe finally that was enough. They didn't leave right away. I heard shoes shuffle, voices murmur, desperation curling at the edges. Then another knock, softer. Harper, please. We just want to talk. I stayed seated, the framed letter from Marina anchoring me. My tea cold, bitter, strangely satisfying. I let the knocking continue until it softened, then stopped. Silence settled again, not hollow this time, but full. For the first time, I understood. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means choosing not to. Sometimes it means standing tall while the very people who fractured you exhaust themselves against the boundary you finally had the strength to build, a wall not made of bitterness, but self-worth. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then the shuffle of retreating footsteps, the dull clunk of car doors, the hesitant hum of an engine. They were gone, not shattered, just denied. I stood and walked slowly to the window, drawing the curtain back just enough to see the taillights fading into the snow-dusted street. I didn't flinch, didn't reach for my phone. I felt no pull to run after them, no aching desire to fix what they broke with silence. Only peace. Real peace. The kind that settles deep in your chest when you stop begging for a seat at a table never set for you. I turned from the window. My apartment felt warmer now. Not louder, not brighter, just mine. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights unplugged, ornaments untouched. But the wrapped gifts no longer looked sad. They were reminders I had tried. I had loved. I had given the best parts of myself with open hands. They just never saw it. I brewed another cup of tea, stronger this time, and let the steam rise around my face as I pulled the blanket tighter across my shoulders. Then I returned to my desk. The letter from Marina caught the afternoon light. You made a difference, she had written. You didn't give up. You made her feel like she mattered. My fingers brushed the frame, wooden, imperfect, solid. The cool glass was smooth beneath my skin, real, unshakable. Even when your family refuses to see your worth, someone else will. Someone honest, someone watching. I thought of all the years I'd spent folding myself to fit, and finally realized I was never meant to be smaller. Not for them, not for anyone. Closing the door hadn't been an act of cruelty. It was clarity. They hadn't come because they loved me. They came because they needed control, the quiet, dependable version of me who no longer existed. But that girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who finally knew. Love doesn't require your silence. It doesn't demand your sacrifice. And it never, ever asks you to shatter just to keep someone else whole. I sat back, sipped my tea, and watched the snow fall, soft, cleansing. And I realized this time I had saved myself. Maybe for the first time I was free. The days passed slowly, gently, like deep breaths after a storm. The silence no longer felt like isolation. It felt like space I'd never been allowed to claim before. I went back to work, made rounds at the clinic. I sat with patients whose families came bearing flowers and cards, and with those whose rooms stayed empty, except for the hum of machines and my quiet presence. I listened. I stayed. I did the work that mattered, the kind that doesn't trend online, doesn't fill glossy albums, but holds lives together all the same. Then one afternoon, a small package arrived. No return address, just my name, handwritten on brown paper in neat, slanted lettering. I opened it carefully. Inside was thick ivory stationery, the ink slightly smudged at the edges. It was from Marina. She wrote about her grandmother, how she still practiced yoga twice a week, still walked to the Saturday farmers market. She remembered in detail the days when the world quietly started giving up on her, and how there had been one vet who hadn't, who stayed past visiting hours, who treated her not just as a patient, but as a living being, still capable of joy, still worthy of dignity. You didn't just save her life, Marina wrote. You reminded her she was still living. I read the letter 3 times, traced the words with my fingers. That night, I framed it, hung it above my desk where the morning sun could touch it, a quiet, permanent reminder. I was never invisible, never too much, never a burden. I was exactly who I needed to be all along. And their inability to see that was never mine to carry. Weeks later, another email arrived. Less polished this time, more desperate. We miss you. We never meant to hurt you. Can we start over? Buried near the end, like a sliver under the skin, came the real reason. Please ask Marina to take down her post. Ethan's having trouble finding work now. It's affecting his future. Not an apology, not remorse, just another transaction, another debt they assumed I'd pay to keep the peace. I didn't respond. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. That evening, as I filed notes at my desk, sunlight stretched across Marina's letter. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt whole, not because someone finally told me I mattered, but because I had stopped asking for permission to believe it. If Harper's story resonates with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, tell me what part hit home, or simply say you see me. Because maybe in doing so, we remind others they're not alone. If you've ever felt overlooked, like you had to earn love through silence or sacrifice, please know this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say no. And you are allowed to build a life that doesn't include people who only show up when it benefits them. Let's start choosing peace over performance together. If you've followed my story this far, thank you for listening to my journey. The quiet battles, the silent strength, and the hard-won freedom. Sharing this isn't easy, but it's a way to remind myself, and maybe you, that we don't have to shrink ourselves to fit someone else's version of love or belonging. I'd love to hear from you. Your words mean more than you know. Maybe you felt overlooked or pressured to prove your worth again and again. Maybe you've been the quiet one, the one everyone expects to keep it together. If any part of my story speaks to you, please leave a comment below. Tell me what hit home. Share your own experiences. Let's create a space where we see each other, not for what we can do, but for who we truly are. Here's what I've learned and want to share. You are worthy simply because you exist. You don't have to earn your place at the table by being perfect, quiet, or endlessly giving. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your peace and growth. Saying no can be an act of courage and love for yourself. When you start valuing yourself this way, you stop carrying the weight of other people's expectations and begin living a life that truly belongs to you. If you're ready, join me in choosing peace over performance. Stand tall in your truth and remember, you are not alone.